So I was looking through the backlog of videos, looking over what used to be a random review and thinking, I should probably give those a little bit more time and go into detail on some of them, and then realized most were animated figures, and then realized among them there was no Lugnut review. How did I not do a Lugnut review? We have to correct this for the glory of Megatron's empire. So now we shall. Let's take a look at this big jumbo jet looking Decepticon. It's actually closer to like an old school style bomber jet with plenty of futuristic touches to him. So it's this weird mix of modern and old school aesthetics, which makes it look very distinct and very cool. I always liked how this looked. Now, the purple plastic and then the teal accents, that's a little bit different. This was back in, like, animated was so much fun because, like, it's not today where they have to try and make the color scheme make sense for the vehicle modes. It's more like, just do whatever. Lugnut gets to be a big purple and blue Decepticon because we think it would look good. And it kind of works here. It really does. So toward the front, of course, we do have some black for all of the windows, and it does look good. I like this. I like how much attention went into all the trim around all of the window panes. That's cool. Nice blue all the way through. A lot of blue across the wings sections, and interrupted by these massive intakes and engines. That's a good touch. Of course, looks like massive bombs hanging off of the wings, which is something cool. It looks like he's just waiting to nuke anything he flies over. It's a little bit scary. Up toward the middle where a bunch of robot mode junk is, but this is animated, so it's actually pretty smooth, all things considered. You can kind of suss out what's where, but there's very little in the terms of gabbage, and it's all got these nice flow lines going through it to make sure it has a nice little look to it, despite eventually separating off into a bunch of robot mode bits. And then we get toward the back end where you have multiple tail fins and some red highlights here. Not entirely sure what the red highlights do in this jet mode, but hey, they're there if you want them. You got big thrusters on the back, just because, why not have thrusters at this point? It's a nice, solid, heavy-feeling jet, too. There's a nice bulk to it. Because in animated in the Voyager class, you are either very tall or very bulky, and as you'll see once we get to robot mode, this guy is bulky. So what else can we point out? Well, we can point out the caution stripes that have a nice metallic yellow to them, and yes, there is a difference between gold and metallic yellow. This is one of them. If you want gold, we kind of look here at the Decepticon emblem, and that's definitely gold, which is another kind of animated trait where some toys here and there just kind of did whatever color they wanted for the sigils, rather than going with just the traditional, which is kind of a cool touch. It gives it a little bit more personality. We also have a few things going on here. You have little guns placed all over. This little top turret can rotate around. And then you have these guns along the side of the cockpit that can also move up and down. So he has quite a bit of firepower for what is essentially just a big jet that would probably be... Well, in the night sky, this probably wouldn't go too noticed, but in the day, yeah, purple kind of stands out. I do like the look overall, though. It's nice and clean. It's hard to tell where the robot is. Even looking at the underside, you can start to see where the legs are, but everything else is pretty much handled pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and fold the landing gear in. Come on. Some of the tabs stick because the toy is a little bit old. I will say one of the things that bugs me is you'll notice some of these panels are kind of on the loose side. Part of this is to age, but I can remember even when the toy was new, it kind of had issues like this, where sometimes the springs didn't quite close things up the way they're supposed to, or in the case of this, there's a gimmick that requires those panels to be a little bit loose, which means they're kind of loose and don't quite hide the surprise of the gimmick as well as it should. But beyond that, very nice jet mode. I like that. So let's see. Let's get this guy to robot mode, and we'll see how much more there is to like. So this whole section of tail wing, the tail fins, the tail itself, and the back spine, it all comes out. And this all has to get left aside. It's a little part for me, but not too bad. So we're going to be okay with it for now. So I'm going to get these feet folded down so we can clear the legs. which are pegged in here on the sides. And then these little panels have to come off to the side. That frees up the legs completely so we can fold them down and then fold them out like so. Once they're folded out, we need to fold out the heels. There are 4 of them in all. 1, 2, 3, 4. That will keep him upright, thankfully. Rotate that to the front, and we can go ahead and clip it down into place. That's our lug nut half done. And it's going to take care of a lot of the rest by itself. I'll go ahead and fold up the wings along the sides. Go ahead and unpeg the arms. We'll finish them off here at the end. Well, might as well do it now, I guess. So for here, you have to kind of hold on to the big bomb and then push these little side wings forward. That's going to split the front and make a little tiny hole come out, as well as give him his big clawed look. And from there, transformation is as simple as grabbing this solid chunk of shell down and letting the Automorph do the rest of the job for you. Behold Lugnut in his full robot mode. Yeah, it's a little bit gimmicky of a transformation, but you know what? That Automorph works so well. I really, I don't want to critique it because it's such a nice little trick and it all works pretty well. Despite the age of the toy, the springs and the gears all still do what they're supposed to do. And it's an Automorph that doesn't really get in the way, and everything it does is useful, which is kind of a neat thing. Like half of the robot is devoted to it. That's cool. So, as usual, close-up look of the head of the ever-loyal Lugnut. He is, of course, in his more iconic design with the Cyclops eye, as well as a few other little eyes on the side, which are always weird. It's not actual eyes, but it always kind of looked that way. But yeah, he's got this massive chin going, which was always an animated thing. The big Cyclops eye and hands. Yeah, he did some doing on Cybertron and got punished for it. Yeah, ask Shockwave about that. But other than that, yeah, he does keep a relatively unique and iconic design. People pretty much know him by like that big chin and the one eye. So, because, you know, guys like Whirl and Shockwave, they're not good enough to have mouths. You know, they didn't deserve mouths. This guy gets to speak, because otherwise how would he declare his love of Megatron every single second of the day? So as we can see, he's huge, nice, and wide in robot mode. As I said, in animated, you are either tall or you are bulky as a Voyager. I mean, it was kind of weird when I started looking around and realized that my Lugnut is about as tall as my Bumblebee. That's a little bit weird. So it's one of those cases where eventually some bigger characters got leader class toys. I don't know if Lugnut was a major enough character to sell at $40 back then, but oh man, he's a little bit out of place in your animated collection because he just doesn't have like the huge, enormous size that you would expect him to from his appearance in the cartoon. But speaking of cartoon appearance, pretty much everything we're looking for is here. He's got his giant clawed hands, he's got his opened up canopy to create his torso, which looks really cool. It's Decepticon emblem on the side, because, you know, if anyone's going to wear 3 gold Decepticon emblems, it's going to be Lugnut. Of course it is. Not a whole lot of new detail being exposed. A little bit of black paint for the belly. But as we can see, it's animated, which means everything is pretty efficiently designed. What could be made into a robot mode part has been made into a robot mode part. Quite effectively at that. All you really get is a little bit of a clawed foot and some black detail around the ankle. You know, aside from that, pretty much everything carries over from the vehicle mode. And if you know me by now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I do like a toy that knows how to use its vehicle for its robot. Creates this nice clean look. And you can see clean, yeah. All he has for kibble is this little piece that hangs off of his back. Not a big deal at all. So other than that, let's see what this guy can do. For articulation, nothing in the head. That's one downside to his unique head, this big face sticking out of this massive hump on his back. No neck articulation, can't pivot up or down. Eventually they did like a realistic Lugnut for the, I want to say, reveal the shield line. It's back when Transformers were in yellow packaging for some reason. Yeah, it's kind of movie-esque Lugnut. And I think they fixed how the head works there. But for now, that's all you get for articulation in the head. None. You do have these dead solid ratchets in the shoulders. That's appreciated. You also have an outward shoulder movement. Not that he can turn his head to see what he's pointing his shoulder at, but also a bicep rotation and a double jointed elbow, which is mostly for transformation, but it's appreciated and it comes in handy for posing, so that's good. The waist has nothing because it's the way it transforms, and the fact that it's holding onto the landing gear kind of prevents that. Universal hips, though, those work all right, as well as a knee joint, which is a little bit weird because it's part of his transformation. And or if I can try and get it right, no, it's not gonna go. No, it's just a weird knee joint. It's just really deep down in there. That's kind of unfortunate. He at least has the rotation going, at least. And then, yeah, you have all the little hinges that work if you need to balance him a little bit better. So all in all, no, kind of stunted as far as the articulation goes. I think at this point, we're kind of looking for a more variety and more looseness in the articulation. More variety. But his torso is rather stiff. No waist, no neck. And yeah, the knees are kind of wonky, so he does get fairly limited compared to a lot of other animated figures. There's poses that work, but for the most part, he is this big brute of a character, so it's not like I expect him to start doing Iron Man poses or anything. He does have one trick in particular that does kind of make up for things, and this guy is very gimmicky as it turns out, but it's gimmicks that don't really get in the way, so I don't really mind them. I'm going to flip this out, and that's going to create this big axe-looking thing with these big blades on the side. However, if you take a look, we have what looks suspiciously like a Minicon port. And yes, a Minicon will actually activate this. It's the exact same size. So if we plug it into his special little hands here, which I guess you could pretend are guns, or his punch of kill everything, which unfortunately not included. You have to hold on to these little fins in order to actually get this plugged on correctly. But once Lugnut is ready and has his weapon in hand, do the Mistress of Flame thing and tink it down onto the ground and create a much better effect than the Mistress ever did when she did that. Now you get a big weapon. Now all these panels come together. It looks more like hammerheads than anything else. And all the blades come together too to form these nice sharp points on the top of each. This thing is vicious looking, and I love it. I love the extra caution stripes that show up too. That's kind of awesome. It's a weapon that has to warn you of how dangerous it is, because that's the kind of stuff Lugnut wields for weaponry, and it is absolutely awesome. So that's a cool gimmick. That does not bug me as far as like the world of gimmickry. In general, he's a gimmicky figure that really doesn't get in the way of anything. You know, he has limited articulation, but I don't fault any of it to the actual automorph or this tail section forming this giant bladed hammer. It all just kind of works. So that, my friends, is animated Voyager class Lugnut. Somewhat of a brick. He is a very stiff character, but he is a character I would expect to be stiff, so it is not so problematic for me. He does have some gimmicks that work really, really well, gets a really unique look in both modes, and of course, he just looks the part, because Animated was so good at making their toys look the part. This is such a characterful figure. He's got everything I want him to have and a little bit more. So I can look aside the articulation and just say, this is a fun toy.